This is episode 79 of the Andrew Hines Real Estate Investing Podcast. Welcome to episode 79 of the Andrew Hines Real Estate Investing Podcast. Today, I have Elizabeth Kelly on the podcast, and what a great guest she was. She's just absolutely filled with knowledge, and she's currently investing in Northern Ontario, although she has roots in the Greater Toronto area. Very, very savvy investor when it comes to multifamily. She's doing multifamily BRRRRs, and she's getting herself some very nice cash flow. And we're talking about perfect BRRRRs where she's going in, buying a fiveplex and managing to refinance all of her money back out, plus another $30,000 or $40,000 in her pocket. Really an excellent strategy and an excellent approach if you want to grow and grow really fast. And this is something I've advocated a lot on this podcast. It's all about being able to recycle that money if you want to keep growing and growing quickly, which ultimately has that wealth multiplying effect. If you think about it, one property is worth $1 million in 30 years time. Say you buy it for $500,000 today, say conservatively that's worth $1 million in 30 years. Well, if your mortgage pays off in 30 years, you now just added $1 million to your net worth in 30 years. So if we could do that with 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 properties, then we just increase that by a number of orders of magnitude. And obviously that's something that many of us real estate investors are striving for. It was a really cool chat with Elizabeth, and we even got into some political ideology. This is very much a nonpartisan show. Of course, you know I do express my feelings on things, and I don't tend to hold back. With that being said, I just want to thank those that have taken the time to leave me a review and rating on Apple Podcasts. I really appreciate it. It's really helping this podcast to grow. Of course, you YouTube subscribers and the people commenting and liking, that's helping so much as well. Thank you very much for being a part of this with me. Once again, if you're new to the podcast, please make sure you head back to those earlier episodes because we really dig into the numbers and I show the spreadsheets right on the videos. So it's easiest if you're actually watching the YouTube versions for those episodes, and follow it right through. We've had so many great guests and they've added so much value on this show. It's absolutely unfathomable. I know that people are paying $30,000, $40,000 to buy into courses that don't teach as much as the guests on this show have taught. So please don't take that for granted. Please make sure that you are digging in because the value is there and it's certainly applicable to the market today. So thank you so much. Without further ado, here is episode 79 with Elizabeth Kelly. Hello and welcome to the Andrew Hines Real Estate Investing Podcast. I have Elizabeth Kelly on the podcast today. Elizabeth, thanks for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be able to connect with you and get to know a little bit more about you. And as always, chat about all things real estate.
Yeah, ditto. Well, we tried to plan this before the whole lockdown and then had to cancel. So now we're doing it Zoom style. Why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself? Because I know you're deep into real estate, you're coaching, but it didn't start that way. So can you just give us a little bit of backstory and of course, tell us what you're doing now?
For sure, absolutely. So my husband and I started investing in real estate about 15 years ago now. And we were doing sort of the right thing, but we were doing it the wrong way. So we were buying single family homes and renting them out. We were buying condos and thinking that we were going to do really well. And then we actually bought 6 condos in one building. We got hit with a special assessment, and all of a sudden we went from $100, $150 a month in positive cash flow to like negative $300 per unit.
Per unit? Oh, that's not fun.
So that hit us pretty hard, and we went, okay, we know we're doing the right thing. We just, obviously, we're not doing it the right way. So we decided to educate ourselves, and we invested in a full service education with it at the time was called Rich Dad, but now it's called Legacy. So we spent a year educating ourselves, learning how to invest, and we restructured our portfolio based on everything we learned. It was great because not only did we learn and acquire skills to buy new properties, but it also gave us the opportunity to figure out what we were going to do with our stuff that we already had. I think we sort of approached it like a chicken approaches an egg, where if I just sit on it and keep it warm long enough, eventually it'll hatch. And that wasn't happening with our properties. So we actually ended up, our very first rent to owns that we did were actually with properties that we already owned, and we approached the tenants who were in the units and they rented to own them. So We educated ourselves, and then from there we started acquiring more and more properties. We started coming back to Rich Dad to be guest speakers, and then from there I actually was a trainer for Rich Dad for about 8 years. So I taught three different courses actually. Basically for new investors to learn the fundamentals. The last one I taught was called Momentum. And it was all the fundamentals that investors need to have, not for, when you want to buy a property or when you want to dabble in real estate, but when this is something that you are passionate about, when this is something that you want to use to prepare for your retirement, to fund your kids' education, to leave wealth for future generations. So that probably was one of the most rewarding parts of real estate. I think there's a lot of people out there who love real estate. And then there's another segment of people who like real estate, appreciate all the benefits, and what it actually is a bit of a stepping stone to do the stuff that really, lights your candle and gets you out of bed in the morning. So
that's the interesting part, is that I don't think that many people love the bricks and mortar or love the linoleum floor or whatever it is, but they love what it creates, and then they create that association in their mind. Oh, I love real estate because real estate equals freedom, equals so many other things. My wife never really loved real estate that much, but I try and put it in the context of, well, with this we can do this and this. So
absolutely.
Yeah, there's definitely, it seems like, I know in my circle, and I'm sure you could probably relate, it's like everybody's a real estate investor. To me, it's weird to talk to people who aren't, but that's just because I mostly just talk to real estate investors.
Yeah, I quite honestly, I think we're boring for people who don't invest in real estate.
Yeah.
Because when I find it's very all consuming. So, most of the people I know in real estate, we don't have a lot of, other hobbies or other things that we spend as much time doing as real estate. And a lot of times we get so fired up and so excited about it, we want to share that excitement with people. And, if you share it with people who have no interest in real estate and know nothing, after a while, they kind of get bored. So I think we end up gravitating to people who are as excited about what we are. And it sort of makes the relationships work. And I find a lot of times the best support we get is from other investors too. Like, when I'm having a bad day or when I'm, frustrated and struggling with something, I have other real estate investors. I call them and I'm like, have you ever encountered this? Or, here's the situation. How would you handle this? And the support from other investors I find is irreplaceable.
Oh yeah, it's such a helpful group, and that's one of the things I love about the network over the last 2 years that I've been able to build just with the podcast and everything. It's crazy. You have a question, you've got somebody you can ask, and now we've got with our meetup group, we've got all these people in there that, you got a question about an N4 or something like that. And I'll see people post stuff like that all the time. And it's crazy. How do you replace that, that kind of a network? It's really helpful these days, that the way people are connected. And I think real estate investors are really, really helpful in general. They want to help and see other people successful too. Because like you said, it's boring if you don't have friends that are in it with you.
Yeah. I mean, it's not like you're going to go to a baseball game and talk to the people next to you about, the house you're looking at flipping, or, what the market's doing, or anything else. You need the people who are in the same space as you, and you really want to network. That being said, you want to network with two different types of people, right? Like, you want the investor support, but you also want to make sure you're networking with people who don't know anything about real estate, but might want to invest. Mm-hmm. So those, then you sort of groom them, and over time they become your joint venture partners, because you are now the expert in real estate. They want to invest. They understand the benefits, especially after stock market issues and COVID and everything else. They understand and they see the stability of real estate, but they don't know what to do. So they come to you and say, I have this amount of money. Can you help me save for my retirement and, look after my kids in the future?
That's absolutely right. Yeah. The people that and I know the people that were around me when I got started, they were the ones that contributed funds, whether it be through an agreement that there would be a partnership, or whether it was just, here's money, give me a return. That all came from close connections of people who knew me well, and understood that I understood a lot about real estate. So that was that's so powerful. Like you said, it's very important to have that balance. I will say that even the people who aren't in it are usually still interested in talking about it, if they're entrepreneurial in any way, right? If they got that itch and they just, they love seeing a good deal. those are the people who are still going to want to talk about it with you, even if they don't ever dive in, and maybe one day they'll dive in as a partner or a lender. So definitely true. You mentioned Rich Dad. Did you ever work alongside Ray Ostrander?
Yes, I did. Yeah,
Okay.
Ray was awesome. He was he's got such personality, and he was teaching. I think he was teaching the property management course while I was teaching the negotiations course and the lease options course.
Yeah, I gotta get him on here eventually. I tried to coordinate that, and he's always in the States. Well, actually, I don't know. I haven't talked to him in a while, but when I did speak with him, he was just back and forth all the time. But yeah, so lots of people I got to interview yet. But when did you start? So about 15 years ago, right? So whereabouts were you investing?
So we started off investing in Newmarket, which is where my husband is from, where he grew up. And then when we got married, that was where we lived as well, was Newmarket. Okay. So it was a great market to invest. Hugely expensive now. Like it's really hard to find, deals there where the numbers work. But I'm finding that's kind of an issue across the board. Like I have a lot of coaching clients I'm working with, and we're looking in most of the communities sort of off the 401 in Southern Ontario. It is really hard to find income properties that cash flow. You really need to be branching out into some of the different strategies now for the numbers to really be making sense these days.
Off the 401 is tough, and unless you go down all the way to Windsor. But
even there, yeah.
Yeah, Windsor in the student game, you can make some good cash flow, which I'm in student investing in London, so I have cash flow there. But if I were to buy it at the prevailing market rates, it would be very, very tight, unless you do the lying to yourself type of cash flow spreadsheet, which so many people like to do.
Tell me something though. With the student market, what changes do you foresee as a result of COVID? Because I have some thoughts on sort of what I think is going to happen in the student market, but I'm really eager to hear what you think is going to happen. Like, what is 2021, 2022? What do those look like to you? What changes do you foresee?
I'm extremely concerned, not to frighten anybody who's in this game. I probably have the most to be concerned about, compared to most people who are listening to this if they own student rentals. But I look at it and I see a very strong potential that we lose a lot of demand for student housing because enrollment drops. Specifically, I could see that in the next year. I could see a lot of people deferring their first year. I don't know the stats on that yet, but September is right around the corner. If I were going into first year, you can bet there is absolutely no way I would be entering first year online. I want to go meet people, live in res, have fun. Like that's a student experience. So I could see a bunch of people deferring this year, which would ultimately affect the demand for student rentals the following year, depending on residents' capacity. But it also may result in some next year when the I would call it a double cohort, may come through if things normalize. Then at that point, there would be a surge in demand. Or we may see a bunch of people who are in first year that don't live in res because there's really just not enough capacity in res because you've got 2 years coming in all at once. So I don't know exactly what we'll see. Those are some of my thoughts. If we get a normalization over the course of the next year, some of the other possible concerns are maybe people shift away from schooling a little bit, seek online. I don't see that as a major threat all at once, but I think that's a potential long-term trend. And what else? I mean, as far as the current situation goes, I'm okay until the end of April. All my leases are secure till then. What it's really going to affect for me is the re-renting process, which I usually start in October. So this year it's going to be funny. We're going to be like sending out emails. Hey guys, I know you're not actually at school, but I do see a lot of them are going to come back though. They want to get away from home. They want to go live in London. So it's still going to move. There's still going to be people there.
That's good. That's good.
What are your thoughts though? I don't want to be the only one giving an opinion here.
Well, what I sort of figured is what may happen, and keeping in mind, when I started university, I was a year older than the students are who are starting now. So, but what I could see is a lot of parents being very concerned for students because of the shared space. Not necessarily going away to school, but because when they come home at night, they're sharing a space with X number of students who might go home on the weekends, and there's just so much exposure, right? Like you look at something like a few years ago, there was a Norwalk outbreak in one of the residences. So what I could see happening is definitely more interest in off-campus housing and more interest in like the bachelor or the one bedroom. Like people being willing to pay a little bit more to have that private space.
Yeah.
I could see that for sure, as opposed to just, I only have my own room, but I share my bathroom and I share my kitchen and, I have all these common areas in the building. I could definitely see there being an uptick in the smaller units where people can live and have their own space.
Yeah. So that's where I'm fortunate. I consider it fortunate and somewhat unfortunate, but a lot of mine are they all have en suites. Only one of my student rentals actually doesn't have that. So as far as that goes, they do have a private bathroom, and that's definitely helpful. I know, like I'm able to charge quite a bit more money by having that. So I know that's extremely appealing to people, especially if you have one person that eventually sublets. They don't have to share the bathroom. They're still sharing a kitchen, but they can spend most of their time in their bedroom. So I'm fortunate there. But I think from a convertibility, like just in like looking at London, if I were to pivot and rent to just a typical homeowner or a regular family, I would be taking a fair cut on what I could get. So I was looking at, other ways to pivot. If there is a growing demand and we start seeing people travel more and Airbnb comes back, then I'd have a good opportunity to actually Airbnb out the bedrooms because they have ensuite bathrooms. So those are some of the things going through my head to hedge. Another thing is I can still build secondary units in the backyards. So I've got some land there. So I was kind of just looking at, what's the cost going to be to do that?
Yeah.
Can I essentially be in at 1% rule on the addition? And I think that there's a potential to maybe not be quite 1% on my build costs, versus what I get to rent. So if I say I rent, build it for 150K, could I rent it for 1,500? So that's going through my head. Can I do that? I think that in reality, it'll cost me more than 150 to build it, but I'll probably get more than 1,500 by the time this all comes around, because I really do see massive inflation coming for Ontario and for Canada in general, and it's going to push rents up. I really do think it will.
Yeah,
we'll see though.
I think too, that's what I've actually spent a lot of time in the last 6 weeks or so talking about with a number of my coaching clients is when they have properties, making sure that they're being utilized to the highest capacity. It's infinitely less, it's more cost effective to go and add, a basement apartment or to add, a coach house for 100 or 150,000 than to go out and try and buy a brand new property, because there's bidding wars and there's all kinds of, financing can be a challenge and everything. It makes a lot more sense to take everything in your portfolio right now and optimize it before you start looking at bringing in additional properties.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've got a few properties that are reasonably deep. One of them is like 140, and I don't think that that's going to be enough to build much of an addition because I already built a big addition on the back, but I can build more. Yeah. It's just actually having the space. So we'll see. But I have another property that's got like it's 230 feet deep. So I've got room. I could technically build a detached secondary unit. However, if I do that, I need to go through site plan approval in London. So that's a little bit of a pain. They'll ask me to do a neighborhood character study. How does this look compared to the neighbors, and sound study because it's near a railroad. And there's a lot of things that I consider when I'm going up and I'm choosing which battles to pick. The fewer people I need a yes from in the process is usually the path I try and take, the less resistant path, because London can be a little bit bureaucratic, as I'm sure many cities can be. But I notice, like, even what I hear coming back to me, about Windsor, and I have somebody I'm working with right now, one of my coaching students, who's converting a lot, changing the zoning. And, the feedback he's getting from the city there compared to the feedback I get in London is insane. Like, he's like, yeah, we would approve a spot rezone of one lot. I'm like, they literally specifically tell me they will not do that in London. Like, no chance, never going to happen. So every city's a little different. You just got to know how to pick your battles.
And I think a lot of it depends where the city is at too. Like, I definitely know, a lot of the landlords and the investors in sort of the GTA markets and some of the bigger markets, they've had real challenges with rent strike. And when you're in some of like the smaller markets, the more distant markets, it's not as much of an issue. Like, there's pros and cons to large markets and small markets. And I think it's really just about educating yourself. It's the same thing in Kirkland Lake where, generally we're able to, if we have a vision in mind and it's going to be something that's beneficial for the town, then, we work on it, and, we can, message the politicians on Facebook and connect with the mayor and say, we have this plan and this is our vision. Can you guys help us figure out a way to make this happen? I think when you're in a lot of the bigger centers, like you said, I mean, London has what, 250, 300?
No, the greater area is 450, but London itself, I think, is around 350.
Yeah, London proper, yeah. So, I mean, that's a huge community, and they don't shift or change easily compared to, some of the smaller ones. And when you've got smaller communities, it's funny because so much of what happens in politics, they're complaining about lack of affordable housing, and then the political decisions that are made sometimes make it more difficult for us to be able to afford additional housing options because it's supply and demand. So if the supply goes up, the demand goes down and the prices go down, right? But when they make it so hard for us to be able to provide that supply, then they're kind of shooting themselves in the foot.
Well, that's kind of what government does, right? Like, my listeners will know where I stand on this, but governments only destroy value; they can't create it. So they consume value, and destroy is probably more accurate because the free market must function. You can't create heaven on earth. You have to allow people to create their own way, in my opinion. So when they these affordable housing programs, like you look at all of our restrictions, there was a brief couple of weeks there where all the forms were down on the landlord tenant board. You still can't evict anybody right now. I mean, you're basically taking landlords and gut punching them nonstop, and then expecting them to create units and want to rent them out to tenants. It's the most asinine approach to stimulating investment in Ontario, where we desperately need it. We don't have enough housing. So they can say one thing and do another, which it seems to be the way it goes. I just think that too many people get sold on this notion, okay, we need special programs. No, we don't need programs. What we need to do is create a fair market that treats all parties fair. And when people are treated fair, they play the game. When people don't feel the game is fair, they don't play. And that is Canada in a nutshell. It's becoming more and more that way. I know we're getting political, but I think it's an important issue that people understand.
Absolutely. And to be perfectly honest, I don't think enough politicians understand what it's like, because I think if they realized what they were creating, they might take a different approach to things. I mean, it just, you look at the situations where the government has their, they run their own affordable housing, like in Toronto, and, look at, is it Thunder Bay or North Bay or Sudbury? Someone anyways, just wrote off $500,000 in bad debt. Like, if the government was so good at providing affordable housing, then people would want to live there and it would be a great place to live. And the reality is they're terrible at providing housing, and it's way more expensive for them to create a unit than it is to make it easy for an investor to create a basement apartment. It costs way less money and they don't have to fund it.
Well, right, because governments will tender the big projects, but small projects, they don't really tender them. They have no idea what a fair price is. It's not their game. They get into it, they waste money, they have an inferior product. It just, governments they can only destroy value. We'll go back to that point. But on the notion of small government and why small government makes sense, and in other words, government get out of the way and let people create value. Because when you let people be creative, find solutions, amazing things happen. Like, think about it. I like to refer back to this for any, potential strong socialists that are listening or watching. I like to bring it back to this. So 1776 to 1913 in the US, there was no income tax. And we have, we went from horse and a lantern for like 5,000 years before that to some of the most incredible creations that happened in a period of 130 years. Yeah, the airplane, the automobile, the light bulb, the wireless telegraph, electricity, and so many more that aren't even coming to mind. All in a zero tax structure. Again, going back to the fact that when the game is fair and no one's going to take what you get, you'll play and you'll create. And compare that to what do we get in the Soviet Union? We didn't really get a whole lot of anything, right? China, they take ideas. They don't create ideas. They take the ideas and then they create the product. Again, making the game unfair for all of us. So I know we're getting a little abstract here, but I think it's so important that people understand that. And then we can kind of give our politicians feedback to try and steer this back to something that really helps all landlords to say, let's let investors go out and create value.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing is, when there's no accountability for tenants, then the tenants who are out there and they're amazing, they get penalized and punished right along with the tenants who don't pay their rent, who don't look after the property, and don't get along with their neighbors. I think there should be a benefit to tenants. Like, I'm an amazing tenant, so I think there should be benefits to that. And right now there really isn't. There's just no accountability for positive or negative on, and in some ways it's on both sides. Obviously, most of the landlords I deal with are on the up and up, and they're more ethical and fair and doing what they can. But tenants should be mad too about the condition of the landlord-tenant board and the processes and everything going on.
Yeah, it just hurts everybody. If you're a bad landlord, you're going to get found out. Like, people are going to talk. You won't survive in this business. I mean, some do for the short term, and maybe the odd one does get through. But if you just let people talk, they'll say, "Oh no, you don't want to rent there. It's a horrible experience," and it gets around. I actually saw this thing floating around on Facebook, which I think is kind of hilarious. But this person actually took a storefront billboard, like the billboard over top of the storefront, and they put, "This person owes me $16,800 in rent for the last 13 months, and I can't evict him." Basically just advertising to the world that this person's stealing, and please help, kind of something like that. I forget exactly what it said, but there is accountability. If you let the market do its thing, there is accountability for actions. It will happen.
The challenge is, I think that she might end up in trouble because it violates, if he was really to complain, it violates privacy rules, right?
Oh, yeah.
So, I mean, I understand the absolute fear and the desperation and the motivation that comes from something like that. The challenge is, it's still not going to motivate him to pay his rent. And in actual fact, she could very well be the one who ends up in. I'm not encouraging
it, but I still think it's kind of humorous.
Yeah.
So getting back to you, you're in Kirkland Lake now. So that's much further north, right?
Yeah. I'm about 7 hours north of Toronto.
7 hours north. So north of Sudbury, northeast of that, right? Yeah.
A little bit. Just drive all the way up Highway 11 and you can't miss us.
Can't miss you. Okay. What's the population of Kirkland Lake?
Depends who you talk to, between 8 and 10,000.
8 and 10,000. So you were saying that's the type of town where you can get things done. Small government, they listen, you can talk to real people, and they can make real change. So it's not so bureaucratic.
Yeah, it isn't. And it's, it's easy to communicate with people. If you want to communicate with everyone in Toronto, like, you have to go to, radio and newspaper and television, and you have to go all these different directions. I find in a lot of smaller communities, they sort of have their preferred form of communication. Like up here, for the most part, it's Facebook. So there's all kinds of groups on Facebook. We don't have consignment stores necessarily. We have one, but a lot of people, they'll buy and sell items on Facebook, and there's a real sense of community up here, and a lot of people know each other. Like, it's very rare for me to be able to go to the grocery store and leave without seeing at least a few people that I know. So it's a different feel. And, having grown up in Scarborough and then moved to Newmarket and then moving here, it's really strange. It's just a different, and even with COVID, when the July 24th came around and everybody started wearing masks, we hadn't been wearing masks up here for months. So all of a sudden we went to, life is pretty much normal, just wash your hands more, to being a lot like it is down south, and we weren't there. So this has been a bit of an adjustment too.
Oh, okay. So yeah, your municipality adopted it as well.
Yeah, I think we had to. I think the public health sort of mandated across the board that all of the district had to adopt these policies. And I completely understand why. I'm not disagreeing with it in any way, shape, or form. It was just really surreal for us to go on. Like, we only had, I think the last cases, we had a few in April, and that was it.
Right,
so all of a sudden it was this thing that was so far away and so, kind of removed for us, is all of a sudden right back in our faces.
Yeah, strange times for sure.
Yeah.
Where you are, is your weather actually a little bit cooler? Do you notice it's a little cooler up there?
Yes.
Yeah.
It is a little cooler. We don't tend to get as humid. But the summers are remarkably like down south. Where you see the huge differences is the winters. Like, we can have, stretches where it's minus 40 to minus 50 degrees for, up to a week and a half at a time. You wouldn't see that in Toronto. It wouldn't get that cold. In part, I think, because the Great Lakes sort of help to kind of moderate the ambient temperature. Whereas us up here, I think it was last year we had about 15 feet of snow over the winter.
Wow.
But the way I look at this situation and at life overall really is you can either, fight it or you can join it and find the best possible outcome. So we have a place now where literally we open the front door, we put on our snowshoes and we head out, and we can go hiking and boating and fishing, and we really embrace kind of the northern lifestyle and everything that goes with it. And I know there's a lot of people during COVID who've left the city and gone to their cottages. And, maybe there's some people who are going to make the decision that, I'm going to work from home and maybe even live here, because it's at just a completely different pace of life. And it's pretty amazing when you embrace it.
Yeah. So you feel like you're in cottage country up there a little bit?
100%. Yeah.
Okay. That's awesome. Yeah. Cottage country is booming this summer. I know. So my mother-in-law and my brother-in-law, they have cottages up in Wyerton and, Sauble Beach area. And it's just nonstop booking, like nothing available anywhere.
Yeah.
And, so good money in that. So that, that's probably one of those ones that we're, a lot of people were kind of worried, well, what's going to happen? But as soon as, the lockdown kind of happened, people are like, well, might as well be at the cottage. If I can't be going around and going to work, might as well.
It's funny to think of like the ripples of how everything's going to play out. Like it could be in the future in Toronto, all those huge office buildings that had so many people and all the people who crammed into the subways and the GO trains and everything else. Like it might be a long time before those recover. Maybe some of those office buildings are going to become, condos in the future, and that'll ease some of the housing, because once people start working from home, like how do you make them go back to the office? How do you make them give up 2 or 3 hours a day commuting to work in an office when they were able to be just as productive, if not more so, working from home?
Yeah, assuming that's the case, and I don't know the stats on that, but I've thought the same. With Toronto, as much as I think eventually it will come back, its values are just so inflated, and then now you've got to expect at least some sort of exodus from Toronto. People just realizing, hey, if I can work from home, I don't need to be in this expensive place. And then you've got offices that are downsizing, so they're going to convert units into res. Then you have all the people who their Airbnb market just dried up, and they're going to list. And then all the people who have taken a hit on rent because the supply of rentals went way up, and then they're going to list because they don't really want to have zero cash flow or negative cash flow. And so I could see a short-term drop in real estate values in Toronto, although that hasn't been seen yet. It's just continued going up. But at the end of the day, of course, we're pulling out the crystal ball here. I think all of these prices everywhere across the board are all going to go up in the long run, because because of the amount of currency that's been injected into the system. And we don't have more goods. In fact, everything's compromised. Supply chains are compromised, and it's very expensive to build right now. Even like lumber's way up. No one can get lumber right now. So it's going to be an interesting time, right? No one knows what to make of this. It's totally unprecedented. So Kirkland Lake, are you investing there right now?
Yes.
Okay, so is that your main investment center, or are you investing elsewhere more so?
No, well, it sort of depends which strategy you're talking about. So in terms of income properties, I have some in St. John, New Brunswick, but most of them are up north, up here in and around Kirkland Lake. But in terms of rent-to-owns, I'm still looking in markets in Southern Ontario. I'm still active down there.
So what's your portfolio look like right now?
In terms of percentages?
Yeah, like what different type doors you have in different areas? Like, is St. John a big center for you, or a small area, a small piece of your investment?
St. John, we're around 45 doors, I think.
Okay.
In Kirkland Lake, we own / manage. We're up over 400 now. And then we have a few rent-to-owns, various places, various communities across Southern Ontario. Okay,
so Kirkland Lake, are you your own manager that manage JV properties, or are you managing for other people as well?
We originally started out because having educated ourselves and figuring out how we wanted our property management done, we originally worked with some property managers up here, and we're pretty labor intensive in terms of keeping in terms of notices to tenants and making sure that we stay on top of everything that's going on in our buildings. So we ended up deciding it was actually easier just to open our own company and hire a staff person to do it like exactly the way we wanted it, to follow our exact processes, as opposed to trying to, have someone who already has their processes and trying to implement our processes on them. And so we just managed our own stuff for a while, and then other, people that we knew started coming up here and asking us if we'd manage, and we've sort of grown from there.
Okay. Yeah, I like the onboarding of this of the different parts of the process. Like, yeah, of course you can't do it with everything, but with management, the way you want it done. Yeah. No other manager is going to do it just the way you want it. So pros and cons, of course, onboarding means you have a lot more work and startup and investment of time up front. But then once you get going, that's what I did. And I think it's the better way for me where I'm at, which obviously you thought the same. So 400 doors in Kirkland Lake, I mean, that sounds like it's a good fraction of the town's doors.
Kirkland Lake's not that small. The interesting thing about Kirkland Lake that most people don't realize is that there's a lot of people who are in town working shifts, and they're just here to work. So there's a good chunk of the population who, for census purposes, between 8,000 and 10,000 people say this is my principal address. But there's a lot of people who are in town who are renting for a period of time, who then go home for a period of time. Some of the mines, they have 14 on, 14 off, or they have 5 and 4 and 4 and 5, different kinds of shifts. So, I mean, there's guys here who are paying rent every month and need a place to live and a place to cook and do laundry and everything else. But they just don't appear anywhere on anybody's radar because, they consider New Brunswick home, or they consider, somewhere in Quebec home, or whatever else. So it's a bit of an interesting community from that perspective, because there's this whole kind of subpopulation that isn't really on anybody's radar anywhere. But I'd love to know, like, what percentage of the people renting here are only here part-time and call somewhere else home?
Oh, okay. So they're bringing a lot of people come in for mining, is it? Is that why they're coming in?
For mining, for forestry. Because Veterans Affairs and some of the other big employers in the town, obviously people move here for that. But mining in particular, with the shift work, there's lots of guys, they can come here, work for 12 hours a day for 14 days. So all they literally do is eat and sleep, and then they go home again. But they still need somewhere good to be able to rent. So we have a lot of tenants like that, where they're here for part of the month and gone for part of the month, but they still pay a full month's rent. So
I was going to ask if you were renting directly to the employers, if they were putting them up in your housing.
Sometimes it depends. It really depends on the quality. So typically, like the true, mining guys, the guys who are down there every day working their butts off in the mines, they would rent from us directly. But when the local companies have executives that they need housed, then they would come to us directly. So one of our areas of specialty is providing higher end rentals that are more in line with what people coming from, Toronto and Vancouver and, major centers would expect. Understandably, you don't find a lot of places like a downtown condo in Toronto. You don't find that up here. It's just not what is the norm in terms of rental housing and availability. So we've really focused on, when we fix up some units, we'll always leave a portion of them that are, more affordable for day-to-day use, but we definitely have some of our higher end ones. They're furnished, and you rent them by the month, and they're meant for executives.
Okay, so you do furnished, a large portion of furnished rentals, I'm guessing like quartz countertops and stainless steel and that kind of stuff, or no?
Not quite that fancy, but certainly, clean, new, in good condition. I mean, sometimes, when you're in towns like Kirkland Lake, where some of the housing stock is older, you open the front door and walk in and it feels like you're on a boat. You're a little bit leaning off to the right-hand side, and you just kind of,
I know that feeling
over there. And I think, it's different. It's different than it is in Toronto. And it took me a while to be able to adjust to that.
Well, yeah, you really do need to go in and understand your community. It's so hard to just go pick a new market, because you have to understand what's so unique. Like you said, statistics can't capture the fact that people come into that town and then leave. You really have to, go there, talk to the locals, kind of see what's happening day to day, to get a better feel of how that market behaves. So it sounds like you've figured that part out. But on the point of the rentals and making it better, it's all relative to what you're competing against. If you can be that much better than and everything else just by not having wonky floors and, having a flat floor and a nice, clean, modern space. That's awesome. Why do more? Just do what the market needs. I mean, I always like to be on the nicer side just to kind of attract that maybe a little bit better a tenant, but it sounds like you got it figured out.
I honestly think that property managers are one of the most underutilized resources for real estate investors. Like, you think about everything that property managers know. They know the market for sale, they know the market for rent, they know who, the average tenant is. Like, they just know so much about properties. And so many real estate investors, the property manager is kind of the afterthought of, okay, well, I'm going to start investing, and everybody just goes to, okay, I'm going to run numbers. Yeah. And we really, this is something I work on quite a bit with my coaching clients, is plan, prepare, execute. Running numbers is more in the execute phase than it is in the plan and prepare. And we really should be, gathering market knowledge and information and making decisions about where the economic fundamentals and the rental market and the sale market, where those are all sort of ideal. And property managers, for the most part, know a lot about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually used to, when I was using a property manager, I would send him stuff and I'd say, hey, I'm thinking, I found this. What do you think? And he would say, well, I have a little harder time renting there. Like, you get this feedback that you wouldn't know otherwise, right? If you haven't rented down there, then how are you going to know? They're in it all day long, every day. So yeah, I agree with you 100%. Now, don't you feel though, like you kind of owe them one, right? Like if you want to go on board with your own property management, but then you're constantly utilizing people in that way. How do you manage that to keep those relationships strong, even if you're not necessarily going to use their services?
That's an interesting question. It really depends. With Kirkland Lake, I think it's a little bit different here because, nobody's going to move up here to manage their own properties. Like they're going to, we're so far from Toronto and where most investors live that nobody's going to want to do that. There's different ways you can do it. You can hire them as a consultant. You could say, okay, you know what, I'd like to pick your brain. I'd like, a report. I'd like to be able to run properties by you, and I'm willing to pay you X amount to do it. But, as a property manager, it's advantageous to me to know what's going on in my town as well. So it's advantageous to me to keep a good relationship with other landlords, with other property managers, and with investors in town, because when we stop seeing each other as competition and start seeing each other as support, there's a lot of really amazing things that can happen.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think competition needs to kind of go out of your mind to a certain degree and then think more, okay, how can we be complementary? How can we be creative? And not step on each other's toes and just do things a little bit differently. So good point. What do you typically invest in Kirkland Lake? Like, what's your typical property? Is it a triplex, a duplex, a single family, a 20-unit building? Yeah, no, we prefer the bigger things, the bigger buildings. I mean, you can acquire duplexes here. I think there's some for sale that are, $60,000, $80,000, $100,000 for a duplex. Now, granted, they need work. They need a bunch of work, but they're still a lot more affordable here than they are, off the 401 corridor. But my preference, most of the time when it comes to financing, we're really restricted by the number of mortgages. So it makes more sense to buy a 4-unit than to buy a 2-unit. And it makes more sense to buy a 20-unit than it does to buy a 10-unit. So, as long as you have the support and the knowledge to be able to think bigger, then I always encourage investors to think bigger. Yeah. Because if you're based on your financial situation, your mortgage broker says to you, you're going to be able to get 4 mortgages and then you're done. So why wouldn't you get 4 fourplexes instead of 4 duplexes? It's a good point. And, specifically if you get over that 4-unit threshold, then you can get into commercial lending where the more the better. And they want you to scale as long as you're doing it right, as long as you're meeting the requirements, the more the better. And usually the biggest obstacle when you get into the commercial buildings is the initial costs, right? You've got the application fees and you've got, the environmentals and all those kinds of fees. So they're definitely a little bit more expensive to get into. But when you're not looking at a building that has like an elevator and a concierge and all that kind of stuff, when you're looking at walk-ups, it's really not that different. Right. From a duplex to a multi-unit.
As a property manager, I'm a little bit more careful who I put in the bigger multi-unit buildings because I don't need phone calls every night complaining about noise and this and that.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but it's really like, as long as you're not talking about a huge difference in the mechanical systems, generally, I don't find there to be that much difference.
So you're buying like a 20 unit building with a central boiler system. Would anything be metered independent, like separately? Maybe just electrical is metered separately?
Hydro for sure. Hydro for sure.
But they're still doing their own water and sewer. Your building still pays water and sewer.
Yeah, and heat generally as well.
And heat. Okay. Okay. So do you have one that you've done? Like, have you done a BRRRR? Is that your typical approach, or are you typically going in on a joint venture? Like, what's your typical acquisition strategy?
So we generally buy like stuff that's in really rough shape, really bad shape. We've sort of changed our business model over the years, and what we've wanted to do is be able to provide investors from, Toronto and the GTA with the opportunity to be able to invest in Kirkland Lake without having any of the stress or any of the headaches. So we've actually built a full service construction division. So we can do everything from day-to-day maintenance all the way up to like major full-scale renovations. So we're in the process right now of doing a BRRRR on a 5-unit building, and we're assisting an investor with doing a BRRRR on a 12-unit as well.
Okay. Could we do one of those as a case study? Like, which one are you more familiar with the numbers on?
The 5-unit is further underway.
All right. So yeah, let's talk about the 5-unit. So what's the purchase price on that?
It was $100,000.
Well, that's nice for 5 units for $100K.
Yeah.
5 units around here. I mean, in Hamilton now, like they're going to like 180, 200,000, even not in good shape. Isn't that crazy? Like double. Oh, sorry, not way more than double. No, I mean, 200 per unit. So yeah, you'd be $1 million on a 5-unit almost. You could be 800 to $1 million.
Yeah.
Okay. So what would you be putting into that? Like, what's your estimated renovation and carrying cost?
About 200 for the reno, and probably about 15 to 20 for the carrying, depending on how long everything takes.
Wow, you can get something for 100 that you need to put 200 into, and my next question is going to be what's it worth? So your reno and carry is 220 then, we'll call it. And okay, so your purchase and improve is about 320.
Yep.
And what do you figure it's worth at the end?
We're aiming for 500. My guess is we'll get around 475.
Okay, so your new mortgage at the end, are you guys going to go for 75% on that?
Yes. Yeah.
So 75% LTV would get you, so 75%, because once you're over 4 units, it's pretty hard to get 80% unless you would insure it with CMHC, right? That's pretty much the only way you're going to do that.
And if you're going to insure it with CMHC, you might as well go with 15% down and
right. Now, I've never specifically done it, but anyone who has done it tells me that CMHC usually doesn't agree on your valuation, so they'll value it lower. So you're not really getting only 15% down. It's kind of a little trick they pull, but I haven't done it myself, so I can't speak from direct experience. Okay, so it looks like, so your new mortgage would be $356,250 approximately if you got that $475,000 appraisal, and you're all in at that point for about $320,000. So now you would be pulling out $36,000, which would be kind of okay. I'd be all right with that deal. So $36,000 in your pocket. Now let's dig into what you expect for rent on that across the 5 units. What are you thinking?
Well, it really depends. Obviously, if you're going to do some of the units as furnished, which, if you're going to do a reno of it to this extent, I usually like to have a portion of the building at least that is furnished rentals. So it would depend, which units you picked. This particular building has a bachelor, 2 1-bedrooms, and 2 2-bedrooms, if I remember correctly. So depending on how many you decide to do furnished versus unfurnished, my preference when we do renos like this is to put Wi-Fi in for the entire building and have some other nice little kind of carrots to make it really easy to rent. I would like to think 4,000, 4,500, depending on
for the whole building?
Yeah.
Okay. So if we want to be conservative, we say 4,000 maybe?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. So 4,000. What kind of vacancy rate would you typically use in your numbers just to be safe?
The nicer units, the vacancy rates are not high. You could go with 5% and come in under that easily.
Okay. So yeah, just apply 5% there. So taxes, what do you figure they'll be?
I don't know. It depends when MPAC realizes that
That you renovated?
that we renovated.
So are you thinking like $5,000 or $4,000 eventually, or no, not even in that ballpark?
4,000 would probably be, might even be a bit on the high side, but let's say 4,000.
Okay, 4,000. Insurance, you're probably going to be around what, 3,000 maybe, you think?
My insurance guy, probably not. I'd say maybe around 2,500.
2,500, okay. Maintenance, would you just assume 5%?
Yeah, because everything in it, like electrical's new, plumbing's new, like heating's new, everything's new.
So that renovation is not a full gut, but you're pulling out all the mechanical systems and replacing them, and then probably a cosmetic update to everything.
Yeah.
Do you do all your windows as well in that budget?
This particular building had some windows that were pretty good, and the roof wasn't bad either. Mm-hmm. So we were able to save some of it.
Okay. Utilities, what are you figuring for that building, like on a year?
Again, it depends. Like, we always rent plus hydro. We never ever include hydro unless we don't have a choice. Okay. But if it's a furnished unit, typically they want everything all inclusive. So depending on what we would go with, I would say maybe put in 1,000 for heat, or for hydro, sorry. And
for the year?
Yeah.
Okay.
Depending on how, what the breakdown was or whatever.
Right. Yeah.
And then maybe 3,000 to 4,000 for heat.
Okay. So 3,500.
Yeah.
Okay. 3,500 for gas for the year. And then water sewer is going to be a cost too, or you're saying the 1,000 included water and sewer?
No, the 1,000 was just the hydro. For water sewer, try 15. Around 15. It depends. Up here, some buildings are metered and some aren't. So it varies by building, depending obviously on the usage and whether it's metered or flat billing.
You have flat billing on buildings? Wow. Oh, okay. That's kind of...
The town keeps trying to get people to convert, and we're like, no,
that's okay. Yeah, not interested in that.
No.
Yeah. Okay, so two other things that I would typically estimate for are lawn and snow removal, like lawn care and snow removal. For a year, would you be like 1,500 on that?
Yeah, that's not about reasonable. Yeah.
Yeah, and then any sort of garbage disposal, or would tenants just take care of that?
Nope, garbage goes out to the curb and it's paid for as part of the property tax.
Okay, so you wouldn't really have any other expenses on that place. Okay, so
management eventually, probably.
Well, management, yeah. So I just have management plugged in here at 5%. Just I don't know what is a safe assumption for management. Say it was managed, just to show people if you had it managed, what it would look like.
Well, our property management fee is 10%.
10%. Okay.
What we use when we're running numbers is we usually put in 13, because on top of property management fees, then you've got fill rates for any vacancies, and then you have HST. So we just put management at 13% across the board. That's not exactly what we charge, but it gives a more accurate picture than just doing 10.
That's smart. Yeah. Okay. That's a nice way of simplifying it. I always like to have a good shortcut. Okay. So if you're worth 475,000, I'm just crunching your numbers, even from a mortgage standpoint. So it looks like according to these numbers we just calculated, like normally the bank wants to see 1.2 to 1 in terms of a debt coverage ratio. And for anybody who's not following with that, you can download my cash flow spreadsheet off of my website, just Andrew-Hines/cashflow. .com/cashflow. Okay. So we're just a little short. So I don't know, the bank might make some slightly different assumptions too, right? We're being pretty conservative here. I'm sure there's a way to make that fit in their model, but so it looks like the building would cash flow about 290 based on everything we put in there, assuming full management at 13%. Of course, if you're doing it all yourself and it was your project and you just wanted to look at, okay, what's actually going into my pocket because of this, you'd be closer to 810. So if we got rid of that management figure there. Okay, so as far as a return on investment, there is no investment. We can't calculate one. But your total return, so we would have pay down. So in 1 year, based on a 25-year mortgage at 2.65%, random estimate, I know your deal might end up being different. So based on that, you would be getting $10,900 in pay down in a year. Your passive appreciation, I don't know. See, that's the thing. What's reasonable for your market for appreciation?
We use 2% as an estimate, but we're pretty conservative in our numbers. I think.
Yeah, I think you're going to be higher than that. I think you're going to be a lot higher than that. But yeah, even if we were just being conservative, so you'd be $9,500 at appreciation based on the 475 starting point, 475,000 starting point, and then your cash flow on a year would be about 3,500. So that's $23,945 a year you're making off of something that paid you or is going to pay you $36,000 up front, which is why we love real estate.
But not off the 401 right now.
No, not really. No, those are cruel right now. But I mean, I think a lot of people are going to love, when they one day do sell.
Yeah.
They're going to love that part. But then when you try and find a new place to buy, that's where you'll not like that.
Yeah. But I think it makes a lot of sense. Like, a lot of people try and fit the strategy and the market, and they just they say, this is the strategy I want to do, and this is where I want to do it. And they try and smush it together. And the reality is not every strategy works in every market. So you either pick your strategy and then you look for a market where it makes sense, or you pick your market and then you look at the strategies that work and you implement them together. I mean, what I see this as is a tremendous opportunity to, instead of focusing on, multi-unit and income property acquisitions, yeah, there might be, the odd deal that will come your way that makes a lot of sense. But if you are really committed to investing, where you live, then look at some of the other strategies that are out there. Look at rent to owns, look at the duplexing, look at severing, look at coach houses, look at all these different opportunities that are out there and sort of branch out and give yourself the opportunity to, have one of the two components, either the strategy or the market, where you're really comfortable, and grow from there.
That's a great piece of advice. That's great.
I think it forces us to be creative instead of just assuming that, people, and I talk to a lot of investors, they're starting out, they're like, I think there's potential, but I just don't know. Like, I'm looking at this deal and I'm thinking, maybe I'm so new, I can't see the potential. And a lot of times, if you run the numbers and it's not working, it's because either the strategy's wrong or the market's wrong.
And I think, so to that point, most people in this game, and there's no fault there.
No,
it's just what they do. But you go to the meetups, you hear everybody else is doing duplex conversions around here because that's the thing that was working in Hamilton, and it doesn't really work anymore because everybody wanted that, and they drove up the value of the inventory. So then everybody wanted to buy these crappy bungalows, and we're paying, $520 or whatever for them. When they're done, they're worth $620, and your renovations are going to cost equal to that amount. So you're not really getting ahead, and that's where it goes back to being creative. Like here in Burlington, it's almost like no one even looks at this market for a conversion or anything like that, because that same junky place would probably be $650,000 to buy if you could even find that. And that would be in a not great area of town. So people don't really do that. So yeah, like you said, they get a little more creative. Are they severing lots? And that's what I see. I see that working here. There was a lot that I actually had my eye on, that an investor had gone and bought the house, flipped the house and sold it for what he paid for it. But then he had a $1.1 million lot that he got not for free, but he was able to sever off and then sell. Yeah. So I don't know his exact numbers, but I'm assuming that person probably made, $800,000, maybe $700,000 on that lot. Maybe it was a year of a process to complete the severance, and then he maybe sat on the lot for a little bit longer than that. But wow, if you're getting creative, you can find big money in this game. But I really like what you said. Either, pick your market and then find the strategy that works in that market, or you pick your strategy and then pick the market that works for that strategy. I think a lot of people do get hung up on, I want to do it this way, and I want to do it right here. Well, no, you got to adapt to what your market is working with right now.
Yeah. And sometimes, when people are starting out or they're newer investors, sometimes it makes sense to take your capital and do, a couple of private lending deals and sort of get your feet underneath you, get used to, looking at the market, analyzing the borrower, analyzing the property and the strategy. And, if you're not able to find deals to do yourself for the first year, then do some private lending, grow your capital and your worth, and invest in, spending some time educating yourself. like, it doesn't make sense to buy it to feel this fear of missing out that so many people feel, and then to just buy a property and either break even or lose money on it. Like, that's, I mean, yes, you can say, okay, this was a learning experience, but you know, there's a lot of people out there who will say, yeah, you know what, I'm looking for $100,000 for construction renos. You know what, if you want to show up a couple of times on the job site and see what I'm up to and learn a little bit, then, you know, I'm welcome. You know, I offer that. It's the same thing with my coaching clients. You know, I said, if you ever want to come up and see what it's like, you know, a day in the life of a property manager or, you know, a real estate investor, then come on up here to Kirkland Lake. Like, you know, we'll show you around and we'll show you what it looks like from the inside.
I think that's super valuable. And that's actually something I've started, including when I talk to people about coaching, is like, you know what, come down and like see the townhouses I'm building. Like, you know, let's go into a couple of my properties and let's talk about what I did and why I did it. And I think seeing sometimes is, you know, is worth 1,000 words. You know, you get to actually put your eyes on it, hear the story, and you know, kind of piece it together in your head. I think that's something that is kind of irreplaceable. And I actually want to do that on the other side. Like, I'd love to, you know, next time I'm in Kirkland Lake, I'm going to give you a call. And
well, I don't know that you would necessarily by default find yourself here, but the office open, come on up anytime, like hop on a bus, bring a bunch of people, and, you know, more than happy to show you what you can do for fun in and around Kirkland Lake.
Yeah, well, it's always cool to see what other people do, right? You know, what do you do different than what I do? And, you know, one thing I'm particularly interested in is you're investing in St. John, and I don't think we're going to get into detail about it, but how do you find comfort investing so far away? What allows you to be, you know, to sleep at night and not worry when you have investments down that way?
It's my property manager who enables me to keep my sanity and be able to handle, you know, what's going on and the ups and downs and that kind of thing. Property managers can make or break cash flow when you're I mean, you know, when you're talking about $150 a door, you know, replace a toilet every month and there goes your cash flow.
Yeah.
So for me, in order to be able to, you know, sleep at night, it's really having the trust and knowing that my property manager is looking out for me. He's not looking out for himself as only, he's looking out for my best interests as well.
Right, and you're a pretty good client for him or her with 45 doors out that way. So that's a nice win-win, right? You know, you're a big piece of the business, so they want to take care of you. Do you know Brock Rogerson?
Yes, I do. Yeah.
Okay.
Brock
Yeah.
and I have spoken a few times. Yeah.
Yeah, he's out that way. So I had him on way back. I think it was like episode 16, talking about his 200 some odd doors out in New Brunswick. Yeah. I hear that you're finally seeing values come up in St. John.
Yes, it's been a while. We've held on for a while. When I was starting out investing, I definitely made some mistakes. One of my mistakes was not doing a great job with fitting the strategy to the market. So I did some rent to owns out there in New Brunswick. And I'm happy to say I just sold the last one that I did 10 years ago for what I paid for it. So single family homes, it's been a tough road to go out there, but it's definitely the multi-units are starting to come back, and it's really nice to see that.
Something to think about is when you factor in inflation, St. John, it's St. John, not St. John's, right?
Yeah, St. John.
St. John has actually been going down in value, but it's coming back now. You know, I just think Canada, it's going to come down to, on our current path, where is their existing infrastructure, sewers, you know, electricity, water, everything, roads in place? That's where populations are going to go. And eventually Ontario will just become so ridiculous that people will be going out to St. John. So that's a great place to be in for the long term, I think, especially because you know, Brock was saying the starting point for discussion is 2% rule. So he wants to get 2%. If he's buying for $100,000, he wants $2,000 a month in rent.
Yeah. Absolutely.
You're of a similar opinion?
I don't know. We haven't bought out there in a while, so I'm not sure exactly what the purchase to rent ratio is. I mean, I think anytime you're investing, you should always be going for you know, maximum returns, as long as, you know, as long as you're doing it in an honest and ethical way with integrity. Right. The way I look at myself, I'm a problem solver. So, you know, bring me into a situation, tell me what your problem is, and I'll look for a solution that will, you know, benefit you and benefit me and any other parties that are involved. And, you know, the more investment strategies I know, the more likely I'm going to be able to find a solution to whatever your problem is.
Yeah, very well said. Is there anything you'd specifically like to share with our listeners and viewers that we didn't cover yet?
I can't think of anything off the top of my head. I mean, this has been fun. I don't normally talk politics. I'm usually like very, very nonpartisan, but, getting into some of the government discussion was certainly interesting. That's not something I've delved into much before, but
yeah, I'm sorry.
Well, that's all right. I think it's great.
I think I offend people here and there sometimes. I try and be tactful. I mean, I don't hide my feelings about things, but I think most of the people who listen here know that. but we'll see.
You aren't challenging people's established point of view if you aren't willing to, run the risk of offending people.
Right.
I mean, if we were all sheeple, then the world would be a really boring place.
Oh, yeah. Like on that note, we're in a very concerning time. And I know not everyone thinks that, but we've come to this place where, remember, and I don't know, we don't remember, but, you learn about back in the day where people's, their mother and father were farmers and they taught their kid at 8 years old how to milk cows and how to plant seeds and harvest the crops. And now we give them a iPad and, have them playing Angry Birds. I don't know what the game of the day is. Candy Crush. I don't know. Things have changed, right? We've sort of become less useful as human beings in general. And I think that there needs to be, a really concentrated effort on us educating ourselves about how our system works. How does our banking system, how do our economic system, how do our political systems work? And I see a very large percentage of the population, not the listener base of this podcast per se, because these are a lot of entrepreneurs that really do think that this is important to understand this stuff. But a lot of the population don't understand how the system even works to have an educated opinion. There are no educated opinions. There's just complete, I don't get into that. Well, unfortunately, that's a very dangerous position in a democracy. That's extremely dangerous. And I never thought of it that way. I always had my opinions, but I never thought of it that way until this all happened. Because you start to see government overreach, right? You start to see the risks of it. And no, everyone talks about the risks of the virus. To me, the risks of the government overreach are 10 times more concerning, like 10 times.
And the other thing that I find very concerning is when people get all of their information from one media source.
Oh, yeah.
That to me, I mean, the media has a vested interest in, being one way or the other, depending on, where their funding comes from and where, their donors are and their sponsorship and everything else. And to me, if you only go to one media source for information, then you're just spouting their exact, opinions and views, and you don't have a balanced perspective on anything.
Yeah, that's just a narrative. You're spouting their narrative, right? I mean, there's a reason, like in clinical studies, peer-reviewed studies, one of the main questions is, what is the funding source? Mm-hmm. In the best studies, in my opinion, but I think that there's a lot that would agree. They like university studies. They were funded by the university because it was part of a course requirement or something. They had to have somebody do a peer-reviewed study, and you'll get a less biased study. Everything's biased, but industry bias is concerning, right? If you have the smoking industry do a study on lung cancer and cigarettes, you're going to get a very different answer from the Heart and Stroke Foundation. That's probably a bad example, but somebody more medically inclined that's more unbiased by that. So yeah, to your point, long way of saying that everyone has an agenda. Everyone has a bias. Everyone has, potentially they get paid, or maybe their vacation to the Bahamas is covered and they get to fly on a jet. Anything. These things contribute to what happens. And I'll just point people back. Like I had somebody reach out to me on Instagram. She's Chinese, and her family was there and had rental properties before the communist revolution. And just one day, the government just said, okay, you can keep the home you live in. These other two are ours. And of course, many, many worse things happened. It's estimated 60 million people were murdered in the communist revolution in China. Stalinist Russia, 20 million plus. And these are estimates because people just disappeared left and right. So you don't even know. And people are so nonchalant about this. We don't get into that. No, we need to get into that. I know I'm not trying to sound doomsday. I just think it's very important that we're aware and we hold our government accountable. And yes, as you said, get different sources of information, not just one. Yeah. So I like to be an alternative source of information, but of course, I'm always I love just researching and like learning new points of view they're not saying they're right, but it's nice to hear them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, one of the worst things we can do is stop having productive discussion around issues and challenges and situations that are occurring today and in the future, and what happened in the past. The worst thing is where we can't say what we think or what we feel and be able to have an honest dialogue about that, where everything is suppressed for fear of repercussions and penalties.
Yeah, and I've had it happen. I mean, on Facebook, sometimes I post something that I shouldn't, or not that I shouldn't, but it's clearly going to stir up some feathers and rustle some feathers. But what can I do, right? I mean, you have to stand true to what you believe, right? And I think that's where I find myself. Like, if someone's, I'm like, I can't resist. I'm just going to post this. We'll see what happens.
They say if you don't stand for something, you fall for anything. So
Yeah, good one. Okay, so where can people reach you if they'd like to learn more about your coaching or just follow your journey?
So Facebook is my go-to because I'm of that generation. Okay. I do have Insta, but Facebook's a lot easier to find me. Elizabeth Kelly Consulting and Coaching, as well as my own personal Facebook page, which is mostly real estate stuff because that's what I do. You can also reach me at elizabeth@ekconsulting.ca.
Okay, awesome. I'll put all of that in the show notes. And one last piece of wisdom before we go. What would you like to leave our listeners and viewers with?
You're putting me on the spot here.
You can pass if you'd like.
I don't want to miss out on the opportunity.
Yeah.
Educate yourself before you take action.
I like that one. So many people just say take action. I'm more leaning with you. I want to educate and I want to take smart action because I made mistakes a lot.
It's harder to undo a bad deal than it is to start from zero. So you're better off doing your research, building your team, educating yourself, and then taking action.
Awesome. Elizabeth, you're very filled with wisdom, I can tell. Loved what you're saying. That's why we didn't spend too much getting into the details because I just like, having an abstract talk with you. I think people are going to get a lot out of this. So, thank you for doing this. And I'll definitely be looking forward to hopefully seeing what you're up to in person one day. And then, of course, keep me posted on the big deals as they come in and let me know some more case studies. Maybe we'll share them. I was thinking about doing a podcast episode where we just do like an update. Hey, working on this deal right now, and this is how it's going.
That's awesome. I think that's a fantastic idea, and it's been a real pleasure. I know this is the first time we've really been able to connect and chat, and I love your perspective. I love the way you look at things, and I wish you every success in the future. If there's anything I can ever do, just reach out, and I'm more than happy. And of course, if you're ever in and around Kirkland Lake, come on up. I'll show you a good time up here.
Sounds good. Well, yeah, I'm happy to have you in the network now. So we'll talk to you soon.
Sounds great. Thanks so much, Andrew.
Thanks for watching today's episode. Just a friendly reminder to please rate and review this podcast on iTunes. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure that you smash the like and subscribe and notification bell. And also leave a comment. And hey, while you're at it, why not share this episode with somebody you think it could help? It helps this podcast grow, and I would really appreciate it. Thanks again. We'll see you on the next episode.